Hello and welcome to the Aussie Football Passport, your one-stop pod for updates on your favourite Aussie men and women who are playing their club careers abroad. I'm your host Alex, and there is plenty of news to cover this week. The Matilda squad for their final internationals of the year against New Zealand was announced. The Socceroos took on Venezuela, and they will take on Colombia next. Another award nomination for a Matilda, some injury news, and plenty more. Without any further ado, let's get straight into it with the headlines. And let's start with a Matilda who has been nominated for an award. It is Kyra Cooney-Cross, and in particular her goal against Germany, which has been nominated for the FIFA Martyr Award 2025, so the best goal of the year. Voting is now open, and we will put a link in the show notes so you can go and vote for this one, so make sure you do. I know I've asked for 2 weeks in a row to vote for our Matildas, but please do. Every vote counts. Well, so they say anyway. Knowing FIFA, their record with corruption is rife. But anyway, that is for another podcast. Now, speaking of Matildas, one who hasn't played for the Matildas in a couple of years, but still a successful Aussie, Avi Luik. She is considering extending her career into a 22nd year, can you believe it, after claiming the Swedish title with BK Häcken in recent weeks. According to the club's sporting director, Christian Lundström, Häcken is open to extending Luik's contract, but it is up to the versatile midfielder and the defender if she wants to play on. In a recent interview with Football Skandalen, she stated that she is open to an extension with Häcken, but there is also interest from other clubs. So plenty to consider for Avi, and we will keep you up to date with her decision once the news breaks. Now, speaking even more about the Matildas squad was announced this week for their friendlies against New Zealand at the end of the month and early December. There are 2 new faces in this squad for these last internationals of the year. Tamika Yallop, of course, who plays her club football for Brisbane Roar, returns to the squad. She's been named for the first time since sustaining a hamstring injury in April. And it will, of course, be Yallop's first time playing under Joe Montemuro. Carly Johnson is the other new face to the squad. It is her first appearance since the May-June series against Argentina. Now, Joe Montemuro explained that there are 2 particular areas that he's looking for, and it relates to those 2 new players. He stated he wanted a midfielder that can break the lines. He believes Tamika Yallop is the one that has shown that in her previous experience, both at an A-League level and at Matilda's level. And then out wide is the other area he's looking at, with the speed and power winger in particular, what Joe is looking for. Of course, the last Matilda squad, he took a look at Courtney Vine. Of course, there's Hayley Rasso in the squad, but there is one, that is the area, I guess, that Joe is looking to build on. Of course, we can't just have Hayley Rasso. We do need another winger that has that power and speed, and that is exactly what Carly Johnson brings to this side, and she looked very good in that May-June series. And for those listeners that have been listening from the very start, you'll know that we are a big fan of her on the pod. And of course, rounding out the Matildas squad reveal news, it's Sam Kerr returning to Australian shores for the first time in 2 years in terms of playing a game. Of course, she has been part of a couple of squads that have been back home in Australia, but it is her first opportunity to play on home soil in 2 years. So we can't wait to see Sam wearing green and gold. Now, before we get into Socceroos analysis, I wanted to talk to you about Antonio Arena. Now, we have talked about him previously on the podcast, particularly his move from Pescara to Roma in the Serie A. Now, Antonio is a Sydney-born lad, but at the moment he's currently wearing the Azzurri for Italy, in particular their under-17 side at the under-17 World Cup. I know technically he's not an Aussie abroad if you take in that information, but look, let's talk a little bit about him because he's on absolute fire at the moment. He scored and provided an assist in a 3-1 win over South Africa in the final group stage game for Italy, and then added another goal in a 2-0 win over Czech Republic or Czechia in the round of 32 match. So they go up against Uzbekistan in the round of 16. He's one to keep an eye on. In the meantime, of course, playing underage football, you can swap allegiances and people tend to do that. Antonio has represented Australia at under 16 level. So I don't think the international tug of war is over just yet. Of course, we've seen Alessandro Gircati move between both nations. And Christian Volpato is another one that is currently being wooed by both Italy and Australia. So I think there's a little bit more to write in that story, but we will keep you posted on this podcast, of course. Now, let's get to that Socceroos analysis. Of course, the first game of the final international men's window of 2025 saw Australia go down to Venezuela in a 1-0 loss in Houston, Texas. It was a youthful squad with 4 debutants playing a tight contest that was settled by a single first half goal. Most notably, Melbourne City goalkeeper Patrick Beach was excellent on debut, despite conceding a goal. He made a few brilliant saves in that one, and the other lads also handled themselves quite well in what was a physical battle between Australia and Venezuela. Al Hassan Toure debuted, coming on as a substitute in the 78th minute of that match. It means the Toure brothers become the 7th set of brothers to represent the Socceroos. Can you believe that? So what a fantastic story that is. The other 2 debutants in that one were Kai Truan and Paul Ocon-Enxler, or Paul Ocon Jr., depending on who is telling the story. But I think the main takeaway from that game was the lack of creativity, and that has to be a concern for Tony Popovic. I mean, there are a couple of players in this squad that he could look to, particularly Riley McGree. But as we know, Riley McGree is coming back from injury, building his minutes. So I guess Popper has been fairly conservative with the minutes he's given him. But there are 2 other names that come to mind that could solve these issues. They are Adam Hrustic and Adrian Segicic. I believe that they're the 2 that Popper should be looking at, and hopefully they will be 2 names that we will see in the next international break, which is in March. Now to injury news, where this Socceroos camp has been a bit of a disaster on the injury front. Now, potential debutant Denny Juric, he actually departed camp. He suffered an injury in training. So a very, very disappointing international call-up for Denny, but hopefully he'll be back soon for his side of Wisła Płock in Poland. So he has returned to his club side to get treatment, and we will keep you updated once we get some more news on Denny's injury. Now, in terms of the actual game itself, Jason Guerrier came off second best in a tackle, and he was substituted off in the 43rd minute of that game. He has now departed camp with that injury, and it does look like it was to his hamstring. No further news as of yet, as he has travelled back to his side in Japan for further assessment. Now, Joey Lynch from ESPN, he has reported as well, going back to training injuries, Nick D'Agostino, he picked up a minor injury and he will not feature in the game against Colombia this week. He has also departed camp and returned to Norway to be assessed by his club side Vikings physios there. Now, a couple of other injury notes that we picked up from Tony Popovic's pre-match press conference for the game against Colombia. He had some updates on Jordan Boss, Alessandro Ciccardi, and Harry Sutar. There were questions in relation to all 3 of those crucial players to the Socceroos squad. Popper stated that there was an update about Geordie today, and that he's back on the pitch, he's running and making good progress, which is fantastic news. The rough guideline that Popper received from Feyenoord that he would be back in action in 2 to 3 weeks' time. So probably just before the winter break for Feyenoord in the Dutch league. Like a lot of European leagues, take a break over Christmas for 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes even 3, depending on what country you are playing your club football in. Now, in terms of Alessandro Circati, it's looking like it's going to be a little bit longer. Parma are being very conservative with his ankle, which is probably fair to do considering he had not the same injury, but related in terms of that ACL injury that he suffered last year. In terms of Harry Souttar, he's also working his way back. He's doing more training, but again, Leicester City are being pretty cautious with him considering the injury. They want to make sure that he is ready to go. So it's a step-by-step process according to Leicester City and according to what Tony Popovic has said there. So that's the injury news, and that is it for the headlines for this week. We will go to a slightly shorter weekly wrap with, of course, the men's game largely paused in most corners of the globe due to the international break. All right, weekly wrap time, and let's start with our ladies in the US of A, where DC Power were defeated by Fort Lauderdale 3-1 in midweek. Morgan Aquino started and played the full game in goals for DC. So good to see DC getting back to winning ways after a couple of bumps in the road prior to that result. Now, some unfortunate news for our girls at the Portland Thorns. They fell 2-0 to the Washington Spirit in the NWSL semi-final to bring their season to a close. Mackenzie Arnold and Caitlin Torpey both started for the Thorns, with Mackenzie playing the full game in goals and Torpey playing 62 minutes in that one. Now, as more seasons continue to wind down, it was the final day of the Swedish Women's League, where Malmo defeated Vitsio 3-1 in a chaotic match. There was a red card each for both sides, a missed penalty and a converted penalty. Courtney Nevin started for Malmo before being withdrawn at halftime, while Daniela Galic was not in Vitsio's matchday squad. Kristianstad defeated Algensas 7-1. Amy Sayer was on the score sheet before halftime as her side scored 6 goals in the first half. Incredible stuff. Sayer went on to play 56 minutes in that one, and you will notice that there is a particular lady I'm not making mention of in this very game, but you will find out who that is later in the podcast for our Women's Player of the Week. So stay tuned for that. Now, Avi Lewick played one half of BK Hacken's 1-0 win over Pattaya to put the cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake on their title-winning season. Of course, BK Hacken have come second for the last 4 seasons in a row. So BK Hacken, congratulations to you to finally becoming the bride and not the bridesmaid in that one. Now, rounding out final day action in Sweden, Polly Doran started and played 88 minutes at right back for Linköping in their 3-1 loss to Rosengard. Now let's head to England, where Sam Kerr scored a brace for Chelsea in her first competitive start at club level since 2023 in Women's Champions League action in midweek. She went on to play the full game as well. So congratulations to Sam as she continues to build that match fitness and rhythm back into her game. Ellie Carpenter also started and played the full game and provided an assist for Chelsea. They completed a 6-0 rout over St. Polton there. Now, at the weekends, they were held to a 1-1 draw against Liverpool in WSL action. Ellie Carpenter started and played the full game for Chelsea, while Sam Kerr was rested and not named in the matchday squad. Now back to Champions League midweek action where Arsenal fell to Bayern Munich 3-2. That was despite Arsenal taking a 2-goal lead into halftime. Very unfortunate for our ladies at Arsenal, where Steph Catley and Caitlin Ford both started, with Catley playing the full game and Ford played 58 minutes. Kyra Cooney-Cross was introduced in the second half for 16 minutes. Then fast forward to the weekend, where Arsenal had the small matter of the North London derby, which ended as a goalless draw. Claire Hunt started at centre-back and played the full game, while her Spurs teammate Charlie Grant was an unused substitute. Kyra Cooney-Cross, Steph Catley and Caitlin Ford all started for Arsenal in a rare occurrence where the planets aligned for all three of them to start. Kyra and Steph played the full game, whilst Caitlin played 86 minutes of that one. Now to some fantastic news for women's West Ham fans. They secured their first victory of the WSL season, overcoming Everton 3-1. And it was a battle of the Matildas midfielders, with Katrina Gorry playing the full game for West Ham and Claire Wheeler doing the same for Everton. Now, Brighton and Hove Albion ran over the top of Leicester City quite comfortably, winning 4-1 in the end. Charlize Rule played 89 minutes in a somewhat new role of centre-back for Brighton. Emily Van Egmond started for Leicester City and played the full match in midfield in that one. Alana Kennedy was a second-half substitute for the London City Lionesses as they continue their red-hot form with a 3-1 win over Aston Villa. Kennedy got 13 minutes on the pitch in that one. Now let's head to Germany, where Hayley Rasso started for Eintracht Frankfurt before being withdrawn at halftime in her side's 2-1 win over PSV in the first leg of the Europa Cup. The second leg will be played next week, and we will bring you the result in the next episode, but a very handy lead for Frankfurt to take into that game. They then backed up with a German Cup tie game against Hoffenheim at the weekend. And this was an absolutely wild game with a final score that read 6-4 in Eintracht Frankfurt's favour. Both of our Aussies, however, did not feature in this one. Hayley Rasso was an unused substitute for Frankfurt, while Jamila Rankin was a late withdrawal from Hoffenheim's side with what is believed to be a knock, but we will let you know once we get confirmation of that one. Now, rounding out our ladies' club action for this week in Italy, where Winona Heatley started and played the full match for Roma in their 1-0 defeat to Vålerenga in the Champions League. Of course, Winona is currently suspended for Roma in domestic action, but that suspension does not carry through to Champions League action, to Serie A action, I should say. Now, Jessica Nash, she started and played the full game for Sassuolo as they went down 1-0 to Tonana. Jacinta Galabadaracci was a second-half substitute, playing 36 minutes for Sassuolo. Now, to men's club action, there's not a lot, as you'll note, because, of course, we are in a FIFA international window where we have World Cup qualifiers going on, and those teams that have qualified are playing friendlies. However, in some of the lower leagues across the world, particularly in Europe, club action continues, and we've also got some action from Japan to bring to you. But let's start with League One action in England, where Joe Gauci played a full game in goal and helped his side keep a much-needed clean sheet in a 0-0 draw with Wickham. Port Vale remain in the relegation places and will need to build on this result if they are to get themselves out of those relegation places. Now to Japan, where Mitchell Duke played 75 minutes in Makita Zelvia's 2-0 extra time win over FC Tokyo in the semi-final of the Emperor's Cup. There were no goals in regular time, and Duke's teammates managed not one but 2 goals in extra time to progress to the final, which is against Vissel Kobe, who, of course, are the favourites. That match will be played on Saturday afternoon, and we will bring you the results of that one in the next episode. All right, so there it is. Pretty brief in terms of the men's club's action for this week. Next up, players of the week, and we'll wrap up the podcast. All right, players of the week. And now I alluded to this young lady earlier in the podcast. It is Remy Simpson, of course, teammate of Amy Sayer at Kristianstad. She finished the Swedish league season with an absolute bang, scoring a hat-trick in her 56 minutes on the pitch for her club side, helping them finish their campaign on a high for 2025. A fantastic way to end her season and some fantastic form to take into Matilda's camp in a couple of weeks' time. So congratulations, Remy. We look forward to seeing you in green and gold and hopefully replicating that form. No pressure whatsoever there, Remy. Now to our men's player of the week. As you can see, it was a pretty small field to pick from, particularly when the Socceroos went down 1-0. Potentially, you could have given it to Patrick Beach for what was a fantastic performance, particularly that reaction save he made to the Venezuelan striker's shot fairly early on in that one. And I honestly thought it was going to be a very difficult award to give out this week, but fear not, because Alamabil stepped up to earn the award this week. He scored in his side Castellon's absolutely bonkers game against Real Sociedad B. So just quickly wanted to give a little bit of an explainer to you all out there that you'll notice Real Sociedad B, yes, they do have an A team which play in the top division in Spain. But in terms of how they have a B side, well, basically it's the reserve side, and they play in either the second division or lower, depending on where the A team is, whether they're in the first division or the second division. It should be noted that the B team cannot be promoted to the top flight, and that's why they are called the B team. Anyway, back to Auer's performance. Not only did he score, but he also provided two assists in a game that ended 5-4 in Castellon's favour. So thank you very much, Auer, for not only rescuing your side's performance and getting them a result, but you've also rescued this week's Men's Player of the Week award, and it goes to you, Auer. Well done. All right, well, that is it for another week of the Aussie Football Passport. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks again to everyone who has interacted with the show. I really appreciate it. Make sure you recommend the show to your friends, family, neighbour, garbage collector, whoever you know who follows football. I'm working on a couple little things for the show, so stay tuned, and I look forward to bringing them to you in the coming weeks. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. It's goodbye for now.